Hello. Welcome to the Game Audio Hour, episode 145. This is a weekly podcast where I guess I should say discuss all things game audio, from creative ideas to the latest techniques, project experiences to audio secrets. Here's where you'll find in-depth coverage and opinions related to game audio. And yes, it's just me by myself. I know. I'm a little sad about that too, but sometimes it's hard to manage things like one, work, and two, sickness. So on the sick front, well, let's just say I am very, very sympathetic to all those people in SoCal that are sick. You know, SoCal is a wonderful place. The temperatures are super nice, sometimes a little bit too nice, a little bit too warm in the evening. And I will go ahead and testify to the fact that being sick when it's 90 degrees in your non-air conditioned room at 10 o'clock at night is one of the worst things in the world. I don't want to I don't want to experience that. The last time that I experienced that, I really wanted the world to end because I thought, oh man, hell is coming. Hell is here right now. It's a horrible, horrible thing. So yeah, sickness sucks. Work, well, sometimes work is actually pretty cool. One of our cohort, Michael Gordon Shapiro, he's actually been out the last few weeks, as some of you may know. I actually got a chance to see some of the fruit of his labor on Sunday because they just had this fun concert reading of his new musical, The Bully Problem. Yeah, it was really cool. Fun musical. The subject matter was basically bullying in junior high, and all sorts of fun, wacky hijinks ensue. Mike was responsible for not just the music, but he also wrote the book and lyrics for this musical as well. And it was really, really cool. This was actually my first time directly experiencing this particular side of Mike, and it was really cool, really fun. And I'm really looking forward to seeing this being fully staged later on, sometime after this Stages Festival that this event was part of. So, Mike, awesome that you're working so hard. Don't work too hard. I hope to see you back on the show again with Chase and Kyle and Alex. Ah, but for now, it's actually just me. Yep. Yes, it is indeed solo album number 2. But hey, I figured why not go for it, because there's actually a lot of stuff that happened to me over this past weekend. Uh, I was actually doing a lot of audio stuff too. You know, not necessarily game audio, but some fun times with recording. And I think it's probably worth talking about. I was set to help record a friend of mine over at a friend's apartment. It was a pretty fun affair. I thought that we were doing it the right way. He had his Mac. He had his interface. It's this really nice Motu Ultralight. I said that I would bring some of my stuff because I had some pretty cool stuff as well. I brought my reflection filter in order to help with the quality of the recording in the room. I brought my mic because I have a pretty nice mic collection. I thought that I had just the right combo for this particular singer. It was my brand new blue bottle rocket with that B7 capsule. It's a really wonderful combination of a mic there. Sounds fantastic. And it did really sound fantastic. Prior to the session, one of the people actually asked me if I had a way of distributing the headphone signal so that all these people could monitor while she was recording. Obviously, we needed a headphone feed for the singer, headphone feed for me recording, but also headphone feeds for everyone else, the producer slash writer of the song, you know. And okay, great. I just needed to get something. I needed to get a headphone amp. I don't typically have one. So I went down to Guitar Center and I got the cheapest headphone amp that could be had there, which was this Sterling brand headphone distributor. All right, this will do. Grab that, throw it in the bag, off we go. Cool. We did this recording. Everything sounds great. Awesome. Let's do another day of this. Okay. I put everything back in the bag. We go back to the apartment to record this thing. And I realize very quickly that this recording is going to be really bad. I plug in the headphone distributor, and the first thing that I hear when I power on that thing is Korean talk radio. And that was really, really surprising. The first time that I used this headphone distributor, everything was perfectly fine. I didn't hear anything from this from the feed except whatever the interface wanted to spit out. This time around, I could not get this thing to not be radiophonic. Well, okay, what am I going to do? I take out the headphone distribution amp, I plug in my headphones, and I record into the mic, and I say, okay, cool, cool, cool. I monitor what it is I recorded, and everything sounds okay. All right, I guess it's just on the headphone side. All right, well, we'll take that. We're just going to have to deal with monitoring um, this song and this singing while there's this little bed of background noise in the form of this Korean radio station. And but we're okay because at least it's not getting into the actual project file. Okay, I plug the headphone distribution amp. I say, sorry, but it sounds like this, but it should be okay. And away we go. I didn't realize that that was wrong. That was oh so wrong because after all was said and done, we realized that printed alongside the singing was this Korean radio. I should have realized it was a pretty cramped situation when that headphone distributor went radiophonic on me. It wasn't just receiving a radio signal, it was also broadcasting out a bit. And that signal was really quite loud. And what was next to it? Well, the microphone cable leading from my mic pre, not leading from my mic pre, actually leading from my mic, the tube power supply into the mic pre on the Motu interface. And as some people probably know, and as totally escaped me at the time, if I have some noise going into some line level signal, there's a little bit of interference there. Okay, that's one thing. But if it's going to be talking to a wire that is carrying mic level signal, and that stuff needs to be boosted up about 40, 50 dB, oh man, you're going to be hearing that radio really loud. So that was not fun. That was kind of embarrassing. I was kind of ashamed of myself. After the words, I actually broke out Isotope. Yep, thank you, Isotope. I guess that's my Real World Talk sponsor shout out there. Because, all right, I gotta take out all of this radio stuff that's in there. And let's see how well I can do it over the course of a 4-minute song multiplied by how many takes that we were going to be keeping. Not super fun. And because it's radio, that stuff was actually pretty broadband, so you can't do stuff super automatically. And some of the stuff is going to be overlapping with the essential parts of her singing voice. So I could try taking it out, or I could try just leaving it in there, or hopefully making it sort of acceptable. Actually, I ended up just saying, we need to record again. And being very sad, being very sorry, being very ashamed of myself for not realizing sometimes stuff happens. Hey, I made a really bad decision with relying on a cheap piece of gear that wasn't very well designed, that went radiophonic on me, and not being careful, even after I noticed that it went radiophonic, because those signals can easily interfere with other analog signals that are routing around your studio, especially mic level signals. Man, I wonder if you guys have ever done something like that, where you have what you think is uh, a nice working setup, and you have a weak point, a weak link, and you fully recognize that there's a weak link, and it actually ends up coming back to bite you at a certain point, and then you regret it, or you have to do twice as much work as a result of that. This is fun. I know I'm going to have to get a better headphone distribution amp, not the $40, $50 Guitar Center special. Oh well, that's the way it goes. Going to schedule another recording, and everything will be okay after that. I hope, and hopefully I wasn't sufficiently shamed such that I'm not going to work with them again. Thankfully, they're mostly friends and they're understanding. So yeah, that was my fun weekend. Sometimes we make mistakes. I make a whole lot of mistakes. Often those mistakes come in the form of stuff that never gets out there. I do a whole lot of stuff where I'm just going to do really dumb compositional things, really dumb sound design stuff. And that's all in service of just trying to explore and make interesting things happen. This was definitely not one of those moments, but oh well, that's all right. Yeah. Oh, there was one thing I wanted to talk about. So, actually, yeah, before I get to that, Jeff mentions, yeah, he's been there a few times. When I first started recording sounds, I didn't know how to increase the input volume of my mic, and some recordings were way too quiet to really use. Yeah, it's actually funny. That's one of those things that is one of the first things that I was informed about in college. It's definitely not one of the first things that I learned, but it is one of the first things that teachers and mentors told me about. Proper gain staging. You get your gain here. Where else are you going to bump your gain? Well, you've got to be very clear on that. Very clear. Um, yeah, and that's definitely bit me a bit in the past. After a while, I thought, okay, I know exactly what's going on with my gear. I have this, 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 this. I'm going to do this. Oh, I've got another preamp buffer here that I could probably do some gain on. All right, I understand it. But still, it is actually a tough thing to learn and figure out. And actually, each piece of gear actually requires a little bit of different learning. Some amps, okay, you could gain it a certain amount. Some other amps, oh, you don't want to gain it that much, despite the specs saying that, oh, you could do 50, 60, 70 dB. You learn after a while, you probably don't want to do it. And maybe you'll just rely on the quality of your interface input and the fact that, hey, you're recording at 24-bit, and actually it's all right. So I actually wanted to go back a little bit to last week because Chase was actually talking a little bit about the use of reference material. And I mentioned that I actually did that quite a bit. One of the things that I find really fun is being able to visualize sound because, well, I'm not the best at hearing sound. Let's put it that way. I do not have golden ears. I'm always rather jealous of people that are out there that can point to a point, a place in the song or a place in the sound effect. Hey, hear that? There's something happening over there, and I will play the sound, and I will listen, and I think, wait a minute, what are you talking about? No, no, no. There's something happening over there, like something in that like 8, 9K range. There's a weird sound, and someone will say, "Oh, well, bring it up in EQ," and you could look at it. Do a little spectral analysis, and you can find it. And I'll bring up the spectral analysis, and I will in fact find that, oh, there's a little blip there. And maybe if I'm using something like isotope, I'll go ahead and lasso that thing and delete it or something like that. I actually find those visual tools are super helpful. And some of them, they're almost cheating. Almost. Because, well, let me just talk about it. Back in the Skullgirls days, I listened to a lot of sound effects, a lot of hit sounds. Skullgirls was a fighting game that I worked on, wow, more than 5 years ago, actually 6, 7 years ago. And being a fighting game, the thing that you primarily hear are punches and kicks, hits, what we called hit sparks, and the sounds that are associated with that. Now, lots of fighting games have their sound effects, and they all have a particular flavor to them. Street Fighter has their flavor of sound effects. I was always an SNK kid. I've always liked the sound of Fatal Fury's sound effects. The Real Bout series, Fatal Fury 3, even those 3D games that a lot of people seem to poo-poo. The Samurai Showdown games, they have their own thing. Tekken has their own flavor of sound effects. And I thought I had a good sense of what all of those sound effects were trying to do. They all had a particular rhythm to them or a particular tonality to them. And in the very beginning, I actually started off from either scratch, making my own sound effects with, just sort of crunching things in my hand in front of microphones or actually outright hitting things. Some of the stuff like taking a head of cabbage and then throwing it, things like that. Also working with library sound effects. I found it really fun to actually start off with things that were very much intended for kung fu films, like Shaw Brothers type stuff. I've always liked that crispness, that extra energy that was in that higher frequency range. It was more stuff to work with that it made that sound more malleable than some other sound effects that I would find in other sound libraries. And I would have fun with that, and I used a lot of basic tools. But then later, I decided to try using some other tools, and I'm not going to go to Isotope. Yeah, Isotope was cool, but it took me a while to actually jump on that bandwagon. I was actually able to get something called the TC Electronics Assimilator plugin. And Assimilator is a plugin that roughly falls into this family of plugins that are known as fingerprint EQs. And fingerprint EQs are basically a type of linear EQ that can actually analyze a sound and tell you, hey, this is where the energy is in this particular sound. And when I first saw that, I thought, wow, that is amazing. That is crazy. How do you do that? And I started just running so many things through this. I would basically hook up my Dreamcast with Garou, Mark of the Wolves, or Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, or all those fighting games, plug it into my recorder, and then feed that into, take that wave file and then put it into my fingerprint EQ, and it would tell me, oh, this is where the energy is in these particular sound effects. I thought, wow, that is awesome. Now, the big thing that this fingerprint EQ was used for, and part of its marketing bullet points, was, oh, you like the mix of a particular song? Well, if you put your own song there, you can just borrow the EQ settings of this song and apply it to your own song. Wow, instant mixing and mastering, right? And that's what I mean when I say it's kind of cheating. Kinda, mostly because that didn't really work all the time. Often that just didn't sound very good. Okay, I guess you're doing some fun EQ stuff. And really, it was just a single slider that said, okay, 0%, 50%, all the way up to 100%, trying to match the EQ of a target song's EQ fingerprint. Now, I was trying to do this with sound effects, and it wasn't really that useful because I tried doing it the way that their marketing bullet points actually suggested to me. What if I put my own sound effect as, hey, here's a sound, and then I put a Street Fighter sound there, and I say, okay, match the EQ. 50%, 75%? Nothing really ever sounded very good. Just didn't. I think a lot of it is the fact that, one, it's a very short bit of sound, a hit sound. That's less than half a second worth of signal to deal with. But also, over that course of time, that sound is changing a whole lot. You don't really hear it with some sound effects, especially your cinematic, your cinema-oriented fighting sounds libraries, which are, boom, boom, just a lot of high frequency energy there. But actually, for a lot of fighting games, the sound effects are a whole lot more musical. There's going to be a tone to them, often a distinct tone or pitch. And that tone is actually going to modulate over time. Yes, over a very short period of time, but modulate in a very clear way. Is it going up? Is it going down? Is it actually warbling a bit? Is it vibrato? And that fingerprint EQ wasn't actually very good at telling you that. You put a sound in there and it will say, oh, this is the EQ fingerprint of the sound, but that's actually not very accurate. But at least it was useful. It was a really useful visual reference for myself. That I could say, oh, okay, this is some sort of look at what this sound is visually. And I can hear that there's some aspect to the sound that is going up in pitch. I think it's somewhere in this range. And then there's this other stuff that's in the sound effect that's actually really stable. Okay, I was basically using this tool, not a great tool, and it's actually not a fantastic tool for this, but I was using it to to go from this visual reference of the sound effect to deconstructing it and looking at the component parts and seeing how I could reconstruct my own sound effects in a similar way. Okay, I've got energy here, I've got energy here, I've got energy here. Where's that energy actually going over the course of this 0.4, 0.5 seconds? And does it sound good? Okay, in Street Fighter, we got energy here, we got energy here. In Samurai Showdown, we got energy here, energy here. Well, actually, there's a whole lot of fun high frequency stuff in Samurai Showdown. Not actually so much in the low frequencies, which was a fun thing to realize at the time. Okay, I've got all that information. Now let's move forward. What am I going to do with my own sound effects? And yeah, that fingerprint EQ, I didn't really use it as a fingerprint EQ. I didn't really use it as that tool that allowed me to, apply the EQ of some target sound onto my own sounds. But just that really simple, really rough visual reference of where it showed the energy of this sound, that was enough for me. That was really cool. It allowed me to actually start thinking about my sounds in a better way. It allowed me to actually discover a whole lot of interesting things when it came to not actually console games, but arcade games. It was a kind of a fun thing, but I was actually talking with Mike pretty early on in this project. Mike was the lead designer on this game, and we were talking about the sound of these hit sounds in the arcade and how they felt in the arcade, how they seemed rather different than how they felt in the console scenario. Oh, there we go. How they felt in the console scenario. And I actually am a real dork, so I actually do have some arcade boards. I've got some of the really crazy stuff, like a Hyper Neo Geo 64. Why do people have that? Well, I have it because I like those games. Thank you very much. But I also had a CPS2, and I'm going to plug in my CPS2 into this. Um, I'm going to plug Street Fighter into my CPS2, and I'm going to actually output the audio from my CPS2 into my recorder, and I'm going to record that. That was fun. It actually made me realize something really interesting about some of those classic Capcom arcade games. They're not very good. No, no, no. The games are actually fantastic. And the audio is actually fantastic. The biggest problem with a lot of those arcade games was actually the analog circuitry. Something that a lot of people don't realize because we don't have arcade boards regularly. We have game consoles. Even if you have a retro console like a Super Nintendo or oh my god, the Super Nintendo is retro. The NES, right? If you're lucky, you had those yellow and white cables in order to spit out video and audio over RCA jack cables. That was line level audio. And that's cool. Arcade boards actually don't do that. The vast majority of arcade boards adhere to something called JAMA spec. And JAMA spec actually says that the audio signal that comes out of the arcade board is not line level. It has to be amplified such that you basically are connecting directly with two wires to some plain 6-inch, 5-inch driver somewhere on the top of the arcade machine. That is the audio circuitry of an arcade board. So on that arcade board, you're not just spitting out audio, you're also amplifying it. And sometimes that amplification section is rather poorly done. You have bad wires, you have bad circuitry, you have bad capacitors, you have bad resistors somewhere. Actually, in the case of the Capcom CPS2 board, and this isn't something that I just magically discovered. It was actually well discussed on things like news groups back in the late 90s. Some of those boards actually had some really bad resistors. And thus, you had what it amounted to a really bad bandpass filter that was affecting the entire sound. And you would have this funky emphasis that was happening in particular frequency ranges. Okay, it's not coming out actually the way that those audio designers actually intended, because the arcade motherboard that the game cartridge, the game daughter board plugs into, the audio circuitry deteriorates. The audio circuitry actually needs repair, but who actually goes and repairs those things? At least in America, we don't treat our arcade machines very well. And that actually lended a lot of those games a particular sound, a sound that many people actually grew very fond of. It worked. People got used to it. And I remember at the time, after recording this CPS2 board and listening to other people talk about their fondness for the sound of arcade games back in the mid 90s, and looking at this visual reference and thinking about how I was going to construct my own sounds, maybe I should not just take into consideration what the sounds were of many of these classic 90s fighting games, but also take into consideration the artifacts that happen because of this deterioration that happens to happen among a whole lot of these Capcom CPS2 boards. I'm going to have that inform some of my audio design. And actually, that was the turning point. Prior to this point, Mike and some other guys on the team always thought that my sound was, oh, yeah, that was pretty good. That's okay. Yeah, that punch sounds pretty good. That sounds not so great. Yeah, these special effects sounds, they need to sound better. Once I passed that point and actually incorporated this idea of how some of these CPS2 boards actually sounded in arcades after many years of use, oh, they actually really started enjoying these sounds. It actually started to really tickle some of those areas in their brain, those nostalgia areas. They're like, oh, yeah, that is the sound of a fun hit sound from the 90s, an emotional hit sound from the 90s. Yeah. That's how I used fingerprint EQs. I've never actually used that fingerprint EQ on a piece of music, honestly. Those things were really intended for whole songs because you can't really get a good sense of the energy of a single sound effect. You can over a song. All right, here's how here's the EQ. Here's how your drums are going to sit there, your guitar, everything in the entire mix over the course of a 4-minute song. And let's borrow that, and you can use your own music now. I actually never really liked the sound of that, but hey, it ended up being a pretty cool tool for me to have fun with. It actually helped me be a lot, make a whole lot more interesting decisions when it came to my hit sound design back then. And this was even before I got into using Isotope RX4. So yeah, just wanted to share a little blast from the past there. It's so weird, actually. Nowadays, I'm playing a whole lot of modern games, and those modern games are not using the absolute best in audio output. And I'm not just talking about things like the Switch, right? Okay, you've got the Nintendo Switch, obviously a modern game system. You're playing things like Splatoon 2, which is really cool. Zelda Breath of the Wild, also really cool. 90% of the time when I play those games, I'm playing it in handheld mode. I mean, I'm playing these games late at night before I go to sleep. I am booting up that system really fast. I'm not bothering with turning on my TV and turning on the nice surround sound system that I actually have. I'm just playing it on that 7-inch diagonal slab and those really crummy speakers that are there. Those are not great speakers. Yeah, this is the state of audio monitoring right now. And it's not just that. Obviously, there's that whole world of mobile games, right? A lot of people, gaming means playing on their iPhone or on their Android. And yeah, I know that the iPhone and Android, you could do things like hook it up to Bluetooth speakers, use headphones. But yeah, a lot of them are going to be using those speakers. I mean, some of those speakers aren't even stereo. Not just that, I actually only recently found out that my wife, I was about to say girlfriend, my fiance. No, my wife, one of the things that she likes doing is she'll bring her MacBook and a PS4 controller over to somewhere. And when she wants to take a break from work, she'll do PS4 remote play. PS4 controller into MacBook. MacBook with its special software, it will turn on the streaming. My PS4 in Los Angeles going to her workplace somewhere in the OC. And it's going to sound all right out of those MacBook speakers. MacBook speakers are not the best speakers. They're okay if you're going to be comparing to everything else in the laptop world, sure. But compared to a full 5.1 or 7.1 sound system, something that actually has decent subwoofers and Wow. I mean, it feels like it's been such a long time since I've actually had a proper audio experience with my games. I still enjoy games. I still enjoy game audio. I still enjoy game music. But man, all of these modern games that I've been playing lately, they're all coming to me blasted at me from really tinny speakers. I'm not sure how I feel about that actually. There's a part of me that wonders, is this going to be this um, new world? Are we going to just continue to accept that audio is this thing that is okay? We're going to deal with what the cards that have been dealt and the physics that come with that. There's only so much that you can do with a little tinny speaker there. I don't know. Maybe someone will do actually some really cool stuff. Because I'm thinking about back in the mid 90s, people thought that, oh, this wonderful sound was happening in some Capcom game, and it was going through a bad amplifier that was eventually shooting into some, you know, really dumb no name 5-inch driver that was hastily attached to a piece of plywood, and it's just shooting down over the surface of some 20-inch CRT. That was a wonderful sound to those people. That was a lovely sound. That was the sound of fun and joy. That was the sound of friendship there. That's pretty cool. I'm not quite getting that right now with some of the games that I'm playing. I mean, I'm starting to get into Splatoon. That's really cool. I like Splatoon, but I've only played it for maybe 1-2 hours. Zelda has some really interesting music. I wonder if some of the artistic decisions that they made, both with the music and the sound effect in Zelda, if those are because of the limitations, the physical limitations of those speakers in the Switch. Why don't we have full orchestra all the time? I remember a lot of people were talking about that when the game first came out. Oh, you got this sparse piano music. Maybe you got a few strings here. Okay, there's a cutscene. Maybe there will be some interesting music there, some more fully fleshed out arrangements. But then you go back into the interactive world space, and all right, you got um, a few vocal grunts, a little bit of foley for your horse, and okay, running along the countryside, a little bit of sparse piano music. The Switch actually handles that pretty well. It's pretty clear when that piano happens. All right, yeah, that sounds like a piano. There's really not too much fighting with each other. The Switch never has to deal with trying to effectively communicate a really complex or busy mix. Yeah, maybe that was the point there. It's a little bit different on Splatoon. As far as I can tell, hey, you got basically some fun rock music that's playing almost all the time. You've got your 2-3 minute matches, and oh man, there's so much stuff happening. You're constantly shooting ink. There's constantly things that are happening all over the place. You're hearing alarms and effects and call outs from your teammates, and this rock music. That's a really busy mix of stuff. I'm not sure if the Switch speakers can really handle that. I mean, so far I'm liking Splatoon. Maybe I'll give it a few more hours, and I wonder if the audio of Splatoon will force me to actually plug it into my TV. But then that actually seems kind of tough because one of the reasons I like Splatoon on the Switch is because, hey, these are really quick games. I can play 3, 4, 5 matches. That's pretty good. And I spend less than half an hour of time actually playing those matches. Cool. I like that. I don't want to have to engage in this regimen of, okay, I'm going to go to the couch, I'm going to power up my sound system, my TV in order to do this. Hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do for this. I'm still thinking about it. I'm still thinking about whether I'm getting that extra enjoyment out of the full breadth of that music and sound is worth my time. Because, for as much as I care about audio and music in my games, it's not quite the game, is it? And I really do enjoy having that handheld experience on my Switch. It's a really nice thing that. Yep. Sometimes I will actually break out my arcade boards. Actually, my Nintendo Switch is resting right on top of my Super Gun. My Super Gun is currently connected to my Hyper Neo Geo 64. And my Hyper Neo Geo 64 is currently connected to my Toshiba Tim. Any of you guys know about that thing? The Toshiba Tim was so cool. I remember I was a high school student back in the mid 90s. I thought, wow, what is this thing? It is a 20-inch CRT that can connect to TV, tune TV signals with an antenna. It can also take in a 15-pin D sub 3 VGA jack and output 1024 by 768. And that was really cool. Oh my gosh. Beautiful, high resolution signal. This thing was actually originally made targeted at the Amiga guys back in the mid 90s, people that were doing video production. Okay, we got our monitor here. We got a Toshiba Tim. You would monitor your video on that. Okay, cut on that, send it out somewhere else. All right. That thing makes a wonderful screen for all sorts of arcade boards, not just your low res arcade boards, but also your mid and high res arcade boards that are, and by high res, honestly, I mean 640 by 480. Yes, that's high res. But hey, in the world of arcade games, 640 by 480 is awesome. It is still awesome. I kid you not. That Toshiba Tim, that thing has really good audio. It's kind of funny thinking about all those arcade games that I'm playing right now. I've got it hooked up to play through my Toshiba's speakers. And okay, it's only a 20-inch CRT, but man, a 20-inch CRT has so much space. You can put so much larger audio drivers on that thing compared to something like a 20-inch LCD. A 20-inch LCD, those things sound really bad. And I remember we would actually use a 20-inch CRT back in those Skullgirls days of 2010, 2011. Hey, these are the things that people like dragging around to fighting game tournaments. Plug in 20-inch LCD, play your game. That's what's going to sound like. All right. But a 20-inch CRT, whew, awesome. There was some bass on that thing. You can hear so much stuff. It was really good. So many of those games that I actually do have nostalgia for, those arcade games like those Fatal Furies and Samurai Showdowns that I mentioned before, I actually do think about the quality of the audio that came from those games. And it was wonderful quality. Really love that quality. Mm. But yeah, I'm not sure. I actually do wonder how many people play their PS4 on something like their Sony Xperia phone. Yeah, the Sony Xperias are not too popular in America, but I mentioned before, my wife, she would sometimes play Overwatch on her MacBook, streaming from my PS4 at home. That's really funny. And theoretically, you could actually do the same thing, except not just with a MacBook, but with a controller, a PS4 controller that has a special harness to which you connect a Sony Xperia Android-powered phone, and it will stream that signal straight to that screen, and you can play Overwatch just like that, staring at a 5-inch, 6-inch Android screen. That's pretty funny. I would actually love to see that sometime. Not just for the quality of the video. And the funny thing is, the quality of those screens are so good now. I mean, it's not just things like the Retina display on those iPhone 6s or iPhone 7s. Full HD. In the Android world, you have some ridiculous things. Some people are actually putting 2K and 4K displays in those very, very small handsets. Yeah, the video is impeccable quality. Really, really nice. And it's funny because some of those phones actually have better quality than some of the TVs that people have at home. I mean, no joke, right? Look at the iPhone. iPhone has a wonderful color gamut. It has wonderful dynamic range. When you compare it to most of the TVs that you can get these days, TVs are incredibly cheap. You can get something like a 32, 40-inch TV for around 200, 250 US dollars, and it will be pretty good. But if you compare it in terms of color accuracy or dynamic range, contrast ratios to something like the iPhone or all those really good Android devices from Samsung, the Google Pixel, all those things, then you compare the audio. It's really funny that audio is not going to be getting much better. It's going to be getting a whole lot worse. We're already thinking about how crappy the screens are, how crappy the speakers are on those 32 and 40-inch flat screen TVs. And then trying to compare that to what you get out of a 5 or 6-inch diagonal phone. Yeah. That's pretty fun. Ugh. I'm actually kind of amazed because I've basically been riffing for a little more than 45 minutes, and there are still people watching this YouTube. All right, I guess there's something there. If anyone has any questions or wants me to talk about anything specific that is nowhere along the lines of this line of thought that I currently have, please go ahead and just poke me on the chat because we have about 10 minutes left. And I can keep on going talking about this particular thread, but if there's anything that you want to talk about, hey, let's talk about that stuff too. Oh, right now, I'm actually thinking about beyond the stuff that I'm doing at work. And yeah, I'm at that game company, so I can't really talk about that stuff too much. I am actually thinking about setting up my new home office because I do want to set up a nice space where I can do some performance, where I can record, where I can mix at home. And I'm thinking a lot about some of these panels that I have. You guys see the panels here all the time, these black panels from LA Sound Panels. Really good. This was actually the second set of panels that I got from them because, as some of you may remember if you watched this show about 2 years ago, the first set of panels really, really messed with my ears. Excuse me. Yeah, they really mess with my ears. Roxel. That's really one of the big things that people use for making these sound panels. They all tend to be about the same size. You go on the web and you find lots of these sound panels. Hey, 24 inches by 48 inches by 2 inches, wooden frame. We're going to put some Roxel in it, Roxel material in it. And Roxel is sort of a brand name for what other people might call rock wool. It's this fun composite fiber that people use for insulation purposes, but mostly for sound insulation because it works really well for sound insulation and it's really cheap compared to the alternative. The alternative is Owens Corning 703, and it's great. Owens Corning 703 is great for all sorts of installation purposes. You will see it all the time in homes, the pink stuff, basically. But it's about twice the cost of Roxel. Roxel sometimes has an effect on people. It had an effect on me. And I remember when I was telling those guys about it, wow, really? Roxel actually affected your ears? Well, yeah, as far as I can tell, if I'm in a room with these sound panels that are made out of Roxel, I was feeling horrible. I couldn't be in that room for more than 2 hours without my ears just really hurting. My left one would feel like it's sealing shut, and I couldn't actually hear out of it. So that was fun. But there's lots of alternatives. There's the 703 alternative, but there's also the denim alternative. I'm actually wondering if I want to keep on going with that, filling sound panels with scrap denim. Works pretty well. A little expensive, surprisingly, for what it amounts to scrap fabric, but hey, they sound good. So yeah, I'm actually debating whether I want to go 703 or denim. Who? The chat, Jeff has a question. What are some things that people who work in game audio, freelance or in-house, can do to stand out from among their peers? How do they become more distinctive? Man, that is a fun question. Being distinctive is actually really tough in the audio world, mostly because there are so many audio people out there. I can tell you what I did personally, which is figure out my connection with other people outside of audio. That's actually not the right way to say it. Basically, I made friends with programmers and producers and those guys, and I was able to connect with them outside of the whole game. First of all, outside of the whole game audio space. At first, I was talking with them in the game space, and that was actually really useful. I mentioned Skullgirls before. I was their in-house guy for about 2 years, and it was great. We had a great relationship. I headed out after 2 years, and because hey, I got this offer at TGC, and it was great. But I still kept on working for them, doing working on sound and music for their DLC stuff. It was great. I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that I was a guy that could talk with all of those guys as a fighting game person. I enjoyed fighting games. I had fun playing fighting games. I had very distinct views on fighting games. I had very specific biases when it came to what I like from fighting games. And that was before I would hit audio. The audio stuff came afterwards. They were saying, hey, we want to make a good fighting game. And I went to them and I said, I appreciate a really, really good fighting game. Oh, and hey, I can make audio for this game too. And I'm pretty sure that that was really the big reason why they hired me, because I cared so much on that level. And the little bit that I know about some of the other audio contractors that they had before I came along was that they didn't really care about the fighting game genre or the fighting game experience in that way. I was able to have that really close connection with them. When it comes to being distinctive in terms of game audio, that's really tough. There's a whole lot of audio that's out there, and there's so many options. Many people are going to be looking at portfolios and looking at YouTube videos and thinking, oh, okay, there's some sound effects there. We're making a sci-fi shooting game. This guy has a sci-fi shooting section in their portfolio video on YouTube. Let's listen to it. Okay, does this match? Maybe it does. Maybe it does. Maybe I'll rate it something before moving on to the next candidate that cold emailed us. That's really tough. It is really tough to stand out just on the basis of audio. But if you can talk to them as a game person, You know, almost all the people that are there um, in leadership roles at game companies are there because they really love games. And if you can share that love for that game, and you can really connect. Maybe you have shared perspectives, or maybe you have really contrasting perspectives, but you can communicate those contrasting perspectives really well. Uh, I think that works out that way. I think that's how it really works. I think that's, I'd like to say that I'm pretty lucky in terms of my own work status. You know, the fact that I've been an in house guy for almost a decade now, you know, just working in house at basically two different game studios. Um, yeah, there's definitely a lot of luck to it, but I do think that a whole bunch of it has to do with the fact that I was able to really connect with them on what their game really wanted to be and what they wanted their game to be. Even before I got to the point of saying, hey, my audio is going to make this thing really stand out. So yeah, that's what I would do. That's kind of connected to the whole network hustle thing that a lot of people talk about. And I think that kind of sells it short. You know, network hustle has a certain connotation to it. That's a little negative. Oh, I gotta, hey, what's up? You know, glad handing, yo, what's up? Hey, it's great to meet you. La 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 la, blah blah blah. Super high energy. Yeah. Okay, move on to the next person. Hey, what's up? Yeah, you're so awesome. Blah 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 blah. um, it's not really about the network hustle. I think I'm actually really bad at hustling. Um, but you know, when I find people with interesting passions and my own passions happen to intersect in a good way with their passions, well, it's fun to talk about that. It's fun to just keep on going and you know, you ever have a really good conversation and you realize that this could keep on going and you don't want it to end, you just want it to keep on going. It's great. Yeah. I think, you know, here I am at that game company. I've been here for about 5.5 years. Yeah, I feel like this is just a continuation of that conversation that we had that started right before Flower, back when it was in development, back in 2007, 2008. You know, I had a particular passion there as a person. I had a particular thought on what it meant to be a game developer serving a game audience. That game company, uh, Genova, had their particular perspective on what it meant to be a game developer serving their particular audience. We're still having that conversation. You know, when we sit down for meetings, when we um, show off presentations of what it is that we're working on, when we're brainstorming, that's all just continuations of that conversation of our passions intersecting and then making this game bear fruit. So yeah. Yeah, in the chat room, Mike saying, yeah, becoming friends with people in the game development community. Yeah, that's a very succinct way uh, of putting what I just spent a long time saying. People are more likely to hire someone they consider a friend than a stranger. Yeah, that is very true, Mike. So thank you for saying that. I actually very much agree with that. Some people do find it hard to make friends in this industry. You know, often it's just because they haven't spent a lot of time in there, and they feel like there's a barrier to entry there. Oh man, I'm just this 18, 19-year-old student. Who are these guys? Who are these amazing people that are doing their presentation at GDC, or they're on some panel at my school, or they wrote this amazing article um, about monetization on the internet, and you know, and there are these people that are chiming in on the comments thread, and they're all so smart and intelligent. You can join in on that. You know, you've got a passion, share that passion. Maybe that passion will intersect with another person's passion, and that intersection will give fruit to a relationship. Maybe it will create a friendship, and maybe it will create a job. Sometimes that happens. Yep. So that's been an hour. Wow. That actually kind of breezed right by. So, hey guys, thank you for watching episode 145 of Game Audio Hour. Uh, we'll be back next week. Hopefully, it's not just me by myself. I'm not sure how enjoyable that is. I think it's going to be doubly enjoyable when we get the rest of the crew back, maybe even triply or quadruply enjoyable. Come on, Mike, Chase, Kyle, join us. We're going to be here next week, Mondays at 6 Pacific. You can find us on our website, gameaudiohour.com, but you could also check out our page on Facebook as well as our Twitter. So like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. You can like and retweet all those things. Thank you to the chatties. Hopefully you got some cool stuff out of me just sort of spouting out random stuff on this weird thread that went through retro games and the deterioration of the analog audio on CPS2 boards. Hopefully that was useful. I promise that it will be even better next week. Let's find out. Bye.